Hello, internet land. Good morning. We are waiting for one more. Our
Instagram.
Yep, exactly. Our favorite little straggler, Instagram. As soon as it gets here, we're gonna go live with our very exciting topic for today. It's apropos that Instagram is always late because it's a form of ooh, ooh. Do you hear that echo?
Yeah.
Okay. How is that happening? Hold on.
That wasn't happening the whole time that we were talking before you went live.
Um, yeah, echo cancellation. Come on, huh? Yes. Okay. Now is it still happening?
A little bit, yeah.
So now do we hear
Oh,
it?
you're good. I don't hear it now.
Wait, I think we do. I do still hear it. Oh
Oh,
god. What is it? Wow.
okay. Technical difficulties.
What about now?
I think it's good.
Okay, yeah. So I think I had my Instagram was not muted, and so
Oh,
what I was saying through Restream was coming out through the Instagram browser. So we're blaming Instagram, not the Brian Hogan, just to be clear. It was all Instagram's fault, and we're good. So it's a perfect segue into our topic for today, which is imperfect action, because of the imperfect way that we began our show. But before we do that, let me just dive in and remind everybody that we are here doing our live broadcast and podcast, DIY Wellness. DIY Wellness, the show for people taking personal growth into their own hands. This is the show where we explore different strategies for improving quality of life and well-being. In each episode, Mo and I are going to explain and experiment with different methods for improving well-being in our own lives so that you can create informed opinions about what you want to try and try them for yourself or not based on whether they resonate. So this is a resource hub for you to do wellness yourself and take personal growth into your own hands.
woo woo.
Yeah. So good morning, Mo. Welcome to our topic of imperfect action. Do you want to tell everyone what we're going to talk about today?
Yeah. So we usually when Brian and I pick a topic, we ask each other, how are you taking personal growth into your own hands? And we kind of reflect on what are the things that we're trying, what are the things we're experimenting with and learning from. And one of the things that's present for me right now is I'm practicing and expanding the ways in which I take imperfect action or give myself permission to do things not perfectly. Because I definitely have struggled with a little bit of perfectionism in the past. One of the places where I've applied imperfect action in my own life that's been really helpful is with like fitness and health and working out, giving myself permission to not like follow a strict protocol, but to let myself just do whatever I can do imperfectly. And that's led to a lot more consistency for me. But now I'm trying to apply that to uh, copywriting. So I write blogs, I write newsletters, I write posts on Instagram, things like that. And I used to want to like reach a certain level of uh, like value and clarity, which would prevent me from sharing my ideas sometimes because I'd be like, oh, that's not like groundbreaking enough.
Yeah.
And not everything that I
The shine.
yeah, exactly. I wanted everything to be like life changing. And truth is, a short post is usually not going to be 100% life changing, but it can help create a small transformation or a positive change for somebody. And so I'm trying to lower my standards a little bit in favor of helping myself do more and be more helpful and be more supportive because when we have a super high expectation and hold ourselves to a perfect standard, a lot of times we wind up either censoring ourselves or paralyzing, procrastinating, avoiding taking any action at all.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's the biggest pitfall. So talking about imperfect action, like if we try to do it perfectly, what ends up happening is we either stop dead in our tracks or we don't even start at all. Or when we do start and we have a failure, we'll take in that failure and say, I failed. That failure means I'm a failure, as opposed to looking at it like a mad scientist, like it's an experiment. And
Mhm.
in science, the nature of experimentation and breakthrough is that you make errors and you have failures over and over and over again until you have success. And scientists don't look at those failures and go, oh, well, that means I'm a bad scientist. They go, aha, another dot on the data set. Good. We know this doesn't work. So we're going to try something else. And they keep just with glee, with this joyful abandon, they keep taking
Yeah.
imperfect action until suddenly we have penicillin or flight or cell phones. You know what I mean? Like, and so
Yeah.
that's the nature of discovery here. So we want to get into a little bit. We're already talking about the benefits of why to show up imperfectly, but really let's start with, why do we want to show up so perfectly? Like, why are we so obsessed with this? And it's because culture has tricked us. It has tricked us thoroughly and pulled the wool over our eyes and sold us a bill of goods. That bill of goods that it sold us is perfection. Be perfect, get to this certain level, and get what society says you should get, and then we adopt it as wants that we think are our own. And so suddenly the idea of being authentic, which is the opposite of showing up with perfection, is to show up in authenticity. It becomes way too scary. So culture has showed us this ideal of perfection, gotten everybody from a very young age to sort of buy into it. And then when we step outside the lines of that, of breaking those norms to try to do something badly or messily or sloppily or imperfect, it kicks up all this fear, and then it kicks up comparison, and then it kicks up shame and guilt and unworthiness. So it's not your fault that you try to be a perfectionist. It's not my fault. I'm a recovering perfectionist myself. It's culture. Culture has taught us to be this way. And here's an example to illuminate the way in which culture kind of teaches us about perfection. Through our schooling, it teaches us that there's one right answer to everything. And not only that there's one right answer, but that we should raise our hand first and fast and get the right answer before everybody else. So not only is it teaching us to be perfect, it's teaching us to be perfect first, to be perfect and better. But if there's a standard of perfect and everybody hits it, then where does better even go? So already there's an illusion there, right? You can't be both perfect and better at the same time if everybody's trying for perfection. So that's
Mhm.
one thing. So we've created this environment of competition and this environment of perfectionism from a very young age. And then all of the surrounding systems continue to reward that mindset. Here's an example that I love. Martha Beck told us this story, and it's from a professor who in his class one day, trying to drive this point home about taking imperfect action, he said, what's half of 13? And he wrote the number 13 on the board. And one of his students was like, 6.5. And he goes, correct. What else is half of 13? And then another student was like, 6.5. He goes, correct. What else is half of 13? And they're kind of like, well, we already told you, like, what the fuck? They probably didn't say what the fuck because it's class, but they might have, I don't know. But they're getting stumped, right? And he said, come on, just think outside the box, like, which is what we're usually not taught to do. What else is half of 13? And one student finally is like, well, just the number 1. He goes, correct. What else is half of 13? So obviously it was like, oh, the number 3. Right? He's like, okay, yes, correct. What else is half of 13? And then they're all like, he's like, come on, what else? Finally, one student goes up and he takes the eraser and he erases the bottom half of the 1 and the 13. And the professor's like, correct. What else is half of 13? So obviously someone's like, whoop, writes it and erases the top half. He's like, what else? What else? And he keeps this going until finally the word 13 is written on the board and someone's erasing the first half of the letters and then the second half of the letters and then the bottom half of those letters and then the top half of those letters and then just the middle bit that still equals half of the amount, like the number. So like
Yeah.
there were so many ways and they went on and on and on. And he just drove this class crazy, proving the point that there are infinite correct answers to the question, what is half of 13, depending on how you look at it, depending on what you're going for, and depending on what you're trying to get. So the idea here is getting the one correct, perfect, right answer is going to squash your creativity. And so
Mhm.
this is a choice we have between pursuing perfection or enjoying our authentic creative experience of being alive. And we only get one. We only get to choose one.
Mhm. Yeah. So, why show up imperfectly? Brian has already express that it allows us to be more creative. It allows us to have more fun. It allows us to feel less shame or judgment because we're not like nitpicking little things about our behavior. Um, but if we give ourselves permission to do things imperfectly, it basically just opens up the possibilities, and it also opens up uh, the range of positive emotions we can feel while doing things. So you were kind of describing earlier, if you're a scientist and you're doing experiments and the experiments fail, the emotion that you experience is not like, oh, I'm a bad scientist. I can't believe that my hypothesis was wrong. No, the way that a true scientist reacts is like, interesting. Like, okay, like I'm learning something and that's exciting and that's interesting and it spikes my curiosity and makes me feel more passionate about what I'm doing. And if you can imagine how it would feel to go about life being able to react that way every time something doesn't go perfectly and doesn't go your way. How
Yeah.
much more enjoyable, lively, passionate, beautiful does your experience of life become? And how much more often are you going to be able to continue going on whatever it is you're trying to achieve rather than experiencing discouragement and shame?
Yeah. Oh, that's such a beautiful treatise on the power of curiosity right there. We can bring the wonder back into our wondering, right? Like it can be awe-inspiring to wonder, taking that scientist attitude of, ooh, interesting. I
Yeah,
love the way that you said that. That is exactly it. Like, because then we can have, I dare say this, actually take joy in the places where it didn't go right, because we
yeah,
now see it as feedback. We're converting failure into feedback by saying failure doesn't mean something about me and my identity. Failure means something about this approach, about this way of going about it, about this methodology. And now I've learned something about this approach or this way or this methodology that I can change and keep experimenting with. It's so much more liberating. So
yeah,
it allows us to bring creativity out, but it allows us to live in that space longer too. Like, I know for myself, when I forget this and I try to get things done perfectly, I'm teetering on the brink of burnout for that entire time of getting to the end of that perfection train. Even if I do eventually get something done, to my estimation of what is perfect, but even then, like the nature of our life and decay, like things start to go wrong, plugins breaks, like things will
yeah,
always happen. So even if you achieve perfection, it's only going to be for a minute, and then there's going to be a new thing coming along, because the nature of this thing we call life is impermanence. It is
yeah.
impermanent. So perfection is this illusion that's been sold to us. It's not even real. From a
Mhm.
higher concept, you could say that everything is already perfect and you are perfect just the way you are. Either way, that means
Yeah,
you can go forward and make a mess and not worry too much about it. So either way, whether you identify with the cosmology that you're inherently perfect and divine, or whether you identify with the cosmology that perfection is a total illusion, either one sets you free to show up and make a mess. So
yeah,
that thing here, show up and make a mess and let it be joyful and gleeful, this process of receiving failure slash feedback from the universe and from life and from your relationships, and then
yeah,
use that to make new raw material and new experiments.
yeah. Yeah, I'm right now what I'm thinking about is how much more open to, like, learning you are when you give yourself permission to be imperfect. I mentioned earlier that, like, the main place that I practice, imperfect action is in fitness and working out, and even I'm gonna give, like, a specific example of how this applies, but I when I work out, if I were to give myself a perfect metric to say like, "Hey, like this is the expectation that I'm trying to live up to." I might say, "Oh, my goal is to do this many push-ups a day. I need to do 60 push-ups a day," or something like that, right? And I could pressure myself to meet that metric, but what I've ended up doing is just saying, "Okay, I'm going to see how many I can do." Right? I'm going to see how many I can do, and some days it's 80 and some days it's 3. you know, and I take, rest days and things like that, but what I've kind of learned in that approach of just I'm going to do what I can do is the truth of the fact that my body is at different levels of strength, like extremely different levels of strength on any given day, and I can see in the moment how much I could shame myself for the days where I'm not able, right?
Mhm.
I could be so down on myself and I could immediately call myself weak for not being able to do a push up on one day. But what it's turned into by allowing myself to do the imperfect action is to give me an opportunity to inquire about, what's happening for me today? Am I sore? Is there something weighing on me emotionally? Is
Yeah.
it my confidence is different today? And it's like helping me learn about myself in connection to or in relationship to the way that my body's feeling on a given day. And you cannot access that kind of inquiry and like self-awareness when you're just pressuring yourself to meet a metric and do it perfectly.
Yes, that's so right. And you know what that makes me think of is the Toltec, the fourth agreement is always do your best. And the
Yeah.
wisdom of that agreement is knowing that you're always going to try your best, but your best is different on a different day. Like
Yeah.
your best is 80 push-ups on a perfect day, but there's
Yeah.
some days when your best is 60, and there's some days for whatever reason that your best is 3. And on
Yeah.
those days, that's enough. It's more than enough. Like all we're meant to do is our best, but our best isn't meant to become some ideal of perfection. Our best is a dynamic and ongoing and flowing process. So
Yeah.
yes to this, and like hear what Morgan is saying, everybody, and we can take this like what much more flexible and adaptable approach to whatever goals we set. And one other aspect before we get into the experiential is time, right? Another way to think about taking imperfect action is to extend the deadlines and extend them massively of what you think you need to get done by what time you need to get it done.
Yeah.
Personal deadlines, especially, like if you have a deadline for a boss and you have to deal with it. We're not saying slack off where you don't have a choice, right? But sometimes even in places where we don't think we have a choice, maybe we do, and a little bit of self-advocacy would go a long way there. So check out episode 4 if you want to learn more about self-advocacy. But even when you
Thank
don't, you really have when you really have freedom with the goals and you have the ability and you've just set this deadline for yourself, there's a way to just go back and say, wait a minute, is that deadline coming from pressure? Is that deadline coming from this enculturated thing of like wanting to get it done fast or get it done well or get it done on time? And if so, can I just take the pressure off so I can enjoy the process of getting the
Mhm.
thing done? So part of imperfect action is action that misses your own deadlines, and that's perfectly acceptable, wildly acceptable.
Listen to how radical you sound. Like, oh, like not meeting deadlines? How how crazy is that? No, it actually increases your ability to enjoy your experience of your one life, to not be in a rush all the time, to not feel like you have to meet some arbitrary metric that we set to put pressure on ourselves. Like, imagine if that pressure didn't have to be there for everything and like that you didn't feel a need to set that high metric and put pressure on yourself to feel like you're enough.
Yeah, exactly. Not just freedom here,
Mhm.
carefree, like being
Carefree.
carefree and also having freedom at the same time. So that's
Yeah.
what this is about. That's what allowing yourself to practice taking imperfect action will be like. At first, it's going to feel funny. At first, it's going to feel strange. It's going to feel radical and countercultural because it is all of those things. It is
Yeah.
countercultural. And you'll have people in your life that go, aren't you going to pick that up? Or wasn't that due yesterday? And you're going to say, frankly, Scarlett, I don't give a damn. And you're just going to go about doing it imperfectly. Okay. And you're just going to keep
Yeah.
doing it perfectly.
Yeah,
Uh,
well, and I wanna kinda broaden or, like, contextualize this with a bigger picture because I feel like when y like, a lot of people's first thought when they hear this is going to be like, "But how are you gonna be successful? How are you gonna be happy if you are, in care freedom sometimes?" Because I feel like that care freedom gets stigmatized and, like,
yes.
if you don't care and if you're not putting pressure on yourself, then you're not good enough, a waste of space, etc. And my counterpoint to that is that there are plenty of people who put pressure on themselves their entire lives to be perfect, to be the highest achievers possible, and they achieve the things they're looking for, but they are miserable. They are anxious. They are afraid of being found out as a fraud. The level of anxiety and stress and misery that comes from never giving yourself a break, never giving yourself permission to be carefree, it costs you a lot. And so
Yeah.
while yes, like, Brian and I are both coaches, so we're all about pushing people to, achieve their goals that are in alignment with their interests and that are going to bring them true fulfillment. but not at the cost of their enjoyment of their lives, not at the cost of their health, not at the cost of being able to, like, fully experience their time on this planet. And so there's a trade-off. Like, you want to achieve things, but you don't wanna be so high achieving that you hate your life.
Yeah, exactly. And that part of that comes from understanding where the things that you want to achieve came from. Where did
Yeah,
this
that's
those
true.
ideas come from? And so as coaches, like Morgan was saying, we will help people to fulfill and achieve their goals. But before that step even happens is helping them gain clarity around why those goals, and are those goals connected to their inherent values, and
Mhm,
the trajectory of their fulfillment. Because your career trajectory and your fulfillment trajectory might not be the same, and
mhm,
that's the kind of thing you want to try to merge. It doesn't even have to be like, at least your life design trajectory and your fulfillment trajectory need to merge. Maybe your
mhm,
career is always going to be a means to an end. That's okay, as long as you're bringing fulfillment
true,
into your life in some way, right? Like,
right,
because you don't want to have an unfulfilling life. And so this exercise that we're going to do now, it's going to help you guys get back into your body where you can discover what's in alignment for you. It's from the work of Martha Beck, and it's called the body compass. But what we're specifically going to do is we're going to do this body compass exercise today, right now, around a deadline that you have, and help you to move that deadline, a deadline that you have set, not one that's on you from the outside, one that you've
mhm,
set so that it can be readily movable based on how you experience this exercise. So we're going to do this body compass exercise on a deadline that you can move, and then encourage you to move it to the new deadline that your body is telling you in its infinite wisdom that it would like the deadline to be, rather than the deadline that your mind has conceived. This will
yeah,
be a good way to sort of notice how the body's wisdom and the mind's preferences aren't always the same, because the mind's preferences are very much programmed from the external a lot of the time for all of us. That's true for everybody. It doesn't make you a sheeple or less than person or any of that. Like, where it's the natural way of, of learning things from is outer conditioning, and then inner critical thought. The inner critical thought piece is what gets lost, and that critical thought happens in the body, is the best place for it. So that's what we're going to do now around a deadline. And then there's a little twist at the very end, which I will save to the very end, around this body compass exercise. So for now, everybody who's listening, or if you're listening to this later on the podcast, then just take a minute, and if it's comfortable, close your eyes, take a nice deep breath. And you want to get to a place of peace and calm if you can. And something that will often help is just reminding yourself, I am meant to live in peace. I am meant to live in peace.
it's not the exercise, but that's a good starting point for it. It's just so people know that's not where it ends.
That's the begin. This is the very beginning. We're just getting ourselves into a place of calm and feeling centered. And now, from this place of feeling calm and centered, you want to tune into your body and just notice the sensations that are going on there now. And then bring to mind a deadline that you have. So for me, I have a deadline of trying to get, actually, I'll use a previous example. I was trying to get my private practice built as soon as I took my first life coaching training. And so that was back in 2021. And my mind had set a deadline of a year from then, which would have been like October of 2022. But then I asked Martha Beck about it, and she helped me do this body compass exercise, which we're doing. And I came up with a totally different deadline. So keep a deadline that you have in mind right now. And then just say to yourself, like, for me, it was a year. So I'm going to use mine as an example, but you take whatever increment of time it is. Is 1 year enough? Does 1 year feel like enough? And like, it actually made me nervous to feel that. I felt nerves in my body at the time that I was doing this exercise. And so Martha was like, okay, what about a year and 2 months? And I said, okay, a year and 2 months. And then I feel how that feels in my body. And still there was anxiety, but now there was extra anxiety because my mind was like, well, we said a year. So now I'm like, am I agreeing to go a year and 2 months? Am I agreeing to go a year and 4 months? So there's going to be anxiety that comes up as you do this exercise. The thing to notice is the anxiety that's thought based, and your mind, from your mind, feeding you about the original deadline, versus the deeper feelings of relaxation that can come from your body. So in my case, she kept asking me to extend until I found one that felt peaceful. And when it felt peaceful was at the 2-year mark. And that felt peaceful only to my body. But to my mind, it was like, what? 2 years? That's crazy. And then Martha said to me, okay, so 2 years, that's what your body compass is telling you. So now to really feel peaceful and do this thing peacefully where joy can pervade it, where fulfillment can pervade it, and there's no rush at all, double that reading. And so I was like, what? What? So that was 4 years. But 4 years from that date is about 2 months from now, right? And I am at that place now where my private practice is being built, but the journey to get to it was so much less fraught after I did this body compass exercise and realized I should move in the direction of what my body is telling me will feel relaxed and peaceful, not what my mind is telling me is necessary and true and right and makes me valuable or whatever. And
Mhm.
so I turned a 1 year deadline into a 2 year deadline. And within a few days of that phone call, I actually embraced the 4 year deadline of it all. And I've been working towards that ever since then, but peacefully, joyfully. And so that's the difference. So wherever you're at right now in your experiential and you're asking yourself, how long do I extend this for? As soon as you get to a place where your body feels even the tiniest bit of letting go, even if your mind is like, what? My body's a quack. It doesn't matter. Just know the difference. Notice the body's powerful feeling of peace and calm, and then see if you can embrace that. See if you can embrace it, letting it take that long, letting it just take that long. And then once you've been able to embrace that, just see if you can embrace the idea that maybe it'll take double that long. And that
Yeah.
that not even that it will take that long, but that you will allow it to take that long. That you're just going to dive in for that amount of time and do experiments for that amount of time. And if one of those experiments ends up being right earlier, awesome. But you're just going to be in your mad scientist laboratory and you're going to go to town and you're going to have fun and you're not going to be watching the clock so much.
Yeah. Well, and part of what this practice of like giving yourself permission to take action imperfectly, which is what this exercise is about, helps us with is it prepares us to be okay when things go wrong, which they inevitably will. Because usually when we're setting a deadline for ourselves and we say this is how long it's going to take me to do this, we're assuming everything's going to go well, and then we feel completely destroyed when something inevitably doesn't.
Why do we
And
keep
so
assuming that for our whole lives? Why? Nothing has ever just gone well. Like it's always
yeah, so it's building in the possibility that something is going to interrupt you, that something maybe is going to catch your attention or take you in a different direction, or maybe you have like a health issue, or maybe you have somebody else in your life that needs care, or you like experience something, life-changing like getting laid off or something like that where your life is not going to go exactly the way that you plan. And so a lot of your goals are going to take longer than you think that they should. And it's not because you're flawed or you're bad. It's just because of the imperfect nature of the way that life goes. And if we can be okay with that and still stay committed to what we're aiming for, the process of getting there is going to be a lot less discouraging and a lot less painful.
yeah, exactly. So embrace this, embrace the time it takes to allow yourself to be creative and joyful and embrace care freedom as you take this kind of imperfect action. Failure is just feedback.
Mhm. Cool. Well, thanks for chatting today, Brian. I enjoyed this topic, and we'll be back next week, Thursday at 8:30, with another experiment in well-being.
Right on. Awesome.